Hello guys, my name is Sam and I'm one of the young producers in the Shout Out Loud project, and this is part of our current YouTube career series, and this is where we get the opportunity to speak to lots of different English heritage representatives and understand a little bit more about the jobs and kind of what their jobs entail. So here I'm today speaking to Rachel Turnbull. She is Senior Collections Conservator, brackets fine art, I think I'm told, at English Heritage. So welcome, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Yeah, nice to see you.
Yeah, good. And you. So I'll kind of just start off kind of quite gently. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about yourself. So kind of what the job is that you do, maybe some hobbies that you have in your spare time, and maybe tell us what's your kind of favourite period of history.
I work here at English Heritage looking after all of the paintings, or the easel paintings specifically. So that means paintings on canvas or panel, usually in oil paint. I like art. I like painting a little bit when I have any time, but I've got two quite small children, so that's not very often, unfortunately. Favorite period of history? That's really tricky. In terms of painting conservation, the things I like working on the most are the really old things, the things that have had a real history and a real life, because that makes them a real challenge. It's kind of like doing microarchaeology almost on something that's really, really old.
Or history something has, I guess it's more interesting for you because there's kind of more of a story and more of a path behind it.
Yeah. Also, the dirtier and the more destroyed something is, the better, because that you can really see a difference. You know that your work is doing good as well. That's the other good thing about something really old.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of moving on to kind of the more conservation aspect of your job, it's kind of quite a specialist area, I would kind of suggest. So how is this something that you kind of got into? Where did it kind of start for you?
So I loved art at school, and I had a really great art teacher. But I knew, and she knew, that I wasn't going to be an artist. That's not something, you've really got to have a vocation to do that. And that wasn't me. But I was lucky enough that she suggested to me when I was about 16 that conservation was something I should look at as a career. And I didn't know what that was. The reason that I liked the idea of conservation is it's a really multidisciplinary career. So you need a little bit of history, you need a little bit of science, and you need good practical skills and, sort of hand-eye coordination and that kind of thing. You've got to be able to use a paintbrush, you've got to be able to color match, and you've got to be able to sort of wield a scalpel and things like that. So I think I liked that mashup of all those different elements.
Yeah, you kind of you get to use lots of different aspects in kind of one job. It's not that you're just doing the same thing every day, I guess. You get to use lots of different, like you say, the art and the science. You can kind of bring it all together into one job. So I think that's really quite fascinating. Yeah. I would kind of also, I remember from looking at kind of your background as well, that you kind of studied art at university, and kind of, what was the conservation experience you kind of got at university, basically?
So when I was, I did art history at university, and because I had this idea of conservation in the background, I knew that I needed other experience more broadly than that. So I always volunteered. I did loads of volunteering at local museums, basically anywhere that would have me. And then I got a place on the postgraduate course at the Courtauld Institute in easel paintings conservation, and carried on volunteering, was lucky enough to get some work in a private studio, just really lucky. And I got my first job before I qualified.
I was going to talk about kind of the voluntary work that you did as well. And I'm kind of interested to know from your perspective, what were the skills that you kind of gained from volunteering? And did you kind of find it quite an enjoyable experience?
I did. I found it really enjoyable. And I think the thing that it stood me in good stead, because although when I got my first job, they wanted a bit more experience than I actually had, because I'd been volunteering then for about 5 or 6 years in lots of different organizations, not doing conservation actually, but doing lots of other things. And it massively stood me in good stead. I don't think I'd have got my first job if I hadn't done all of that extra work.
Yeah, it's really fascinating as well, because I think, especially in the heritage sector, I think a lot of the opportunities that you get kind of come about from starting. A lot of people I know with English Heritage started as kind of volunteers. So say kind of being at these sites and kind of working and gaining that experience. And I think you kind of mentioned this, but I think you'd agree that kind of the experience that you get is kind of very practical in English Heritage. You get to understand not just about kind of, the job that you're doing, but you understand about the culture of English Heritage. You understand about where you can go from there. It's kind of like having that inside knowledge is kind of something that's quite useful and valuable.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're at school, and someone says, oh, do you want to go and work in heritage? I don't think you'd necessarily understand all the different kinds of very specific career opportunities there are. But once you're in that world volunteering, you can see, oh, there is a conservator and there's a curator and there are different kinds of conservator, and then there's the front of house staff and the historians, and there's such a breadth of different careers. And once you know about them, you can find the fit for you. And that's, it's really important.
Yeah. So I would kind of now move on to kind of some of the experience that you've kind of done post-volunteering. So you gained the voluntary experience, you got those doors inside to organisations. And I'm looking at your CV-ish, you've worked at some pretty cool places, the National Museum of Wales, the V&A Museum, and now you're at English Heritage. Kind of what were the roles that you did? What were they like? And kind of what were you responsible for in some of these roles?
So I suppose I've kind of, as a conservator, you can really get into very, very niche. So it's quite niche anyway. So I'm only qualified to conserve easel paintings. I can't do anything else. And that's the same. So you pick and choose with conservation. So you could be into, I don't know, industrial heritage and know how to restore a steam train or an aeroplane, or you can do what I do, which is easel paintings, or it could be jewelry, it could, and your training follows those particular paths. My career has been in organisations where I've been part of a small team looking after a big range of objects, both in the National Museum Wales and here. In the V&A, it was a bit more specific. So I was employed before the opening of the medieval and Renaissance galleries. So I was really lucky enough there to work on a lot of medieval and Renaissance artwork, funnily enough.
Yeah.
That may be where my love of older things comes from. I don't know. And then came here to come to English Heritage and look at works largely in their original setting is just fantastic. And it just gives that extra layer of history. Looking at a painting that's still in the building for which somebody commissioned it, say, is just that's just an extra layer.
Within your job, there's kind of a certain, I don't know, responsibility that you have, I guess, to kind of conserve these things. You kind of feel like a certain attachment to the items, like you want to conserve them really well and kind of protect them for future generations.
Yeah, totally. And I think that when you have things in the studio, you spend a lot of time with them. My colleague and I, Alice, we always say it's sort of like you fall in love with the thing that you've got in front of you, because I'm sitting right up close to something for all of that time, and you're not just looking at it, just standing back and looking at it on a wall. You're looking right up at the cracks and the paintwork and the brushstroke, and you get this sort of quite intimate knowledge of an object. And you want to do the best. You want to do the best for that particular object, but also so that then the visitors and everybody else can appreciate it as well as is possible.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the devil's in the detail with your job. I guess you've got to make sure that every single little, brushstroke is kind of to the millimeter, I suppose, and making sure that it's kind of exactly right, just so that it's kind of restored effectively and kind of to a good standard.
Yeah, no, we've got a lot of microscopes and things like that. So we, where necessary, we really go right down into microscopic detail.
So I was going to kind of turn back now to kind of the medieval galleries that you kind of worked at the V&A Victoria and Albert Museum. I think I remember reading that the objects that were in that gallery spanned about a period of 1,300 years or something like that. It was quite a big period. Did you, while you were working at the V&A, did you kind of have a favourite item in the collection?
There's an altarpiece by March Bertram from around 1370, and it had been, it was covered in brown varnish and brown paint, and we were able to really transform that object from a kind of brown, dark, maybe stereotypical view of a medieval piece of art to the most extraordinary colours. It's bright red and bright blue and bright green. It's in gold everywhere. It kind of is. It's almost sort of neon in its brightness, and that was a remarkable thing to work on. And it was so old, and the artist also had snuck in loads of little humorous details that you wouldn't normally have seen, like little people poking their noses around corners and peering at things.
Moving back now to your kind of current role as Senior Collections Conservator, kind of, this might be a very strange question, but do you kind of have quite an average, is there like an average day in the job as a Senior Collection Conservator, or kind of does it kind of vary quite a lot day to day?
No average day.
Yeah.
No, I would say I don't know where I'm going to be day in, day out. I have to use my calendar. I haven't got a clue what I'm doing, and if I don't keep track of it. So today I'm in the studio. You can see behind me. I'm up in the rafters. And later on, I'll be doing a bit of practical work on some paintings that we've got in the studio from Kenwood House. A couple of paintings by Reynolds. A painting that may or may not be by Cornelius Johnson. I found a signature on it last week, so we're going to investigate that and see if it actually is by him or not. But yesterday I was in Apsley House, and I was cleaning and looking after some paintings that are going to be in the new exhibition there, called Wellington and His Women. And then next week I'll be at Marble Hill. Always all over the place and always doing something different.
Do you kind of like the fact that you kind of get to go and see the English heritage sites and kind of get to see the places on the ground, really?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a complete privilege. The thing, there's a particular site, so Audley End, you go to Audley End, and as a sort of member of staff, you get to go sort of slightly to places that the public don't go to, and go up and down the tiny little servant staircases that the public, no idea they're there, hidden in. And every time I use those staircases at Audley End, I get a little sort of thrill that I'm kind of doing something that nobody else knows is there, and sort of almost secrets that people don't see. I'm incredibly lucky with what I do. I really love my job.
And I think I'm probably just going to re-emphasize a point that kind of conservation, I guess, for like you, it's a job that's never going to end, I guess. So once you kind of conserve one thing and you kind of go around and conserve every kind of everything that you can conserve in an English heritage site, you kind of go back round in a circle. Do you kind of feel that it's kind of like a constant conservation project that you're kind of embarking upon?
Yeah, it's endless. I mean, we also have a condition audit of all of the paintings, and we give them a score. So between 1 and 4, and 4 is in unstable condition and 1 is in really good condition. So we try and pick the items that are in the worst condition to work on first. But it's endless, and that list is you might fix a few things, but a few other things might have deteriorated for some other unforeseen reason. So it's never ending.
From your perspective, have you had any like setbacks in your career? And if you did, how did you kind of overcome some of those setbacks?
I mean, it's fair to say that I was told when I was sort of doing my A-levels and thinking about conservation, everyone said, don't do it. I didn't get an awful lot of support from careers advisory services and that kind of thing, because I think it was just a bit, they didn't really understand what it was. And also there aren't, being really honest, they're not a lot of painting conservators. So you've got to be very tenacious if you want to do it as a career. You've got to really decide, that's what I'm going to do, and go for it. My attitude was always, why not me? Somebody has to do it. Why not me? So that was it. And apart from that, I think I've been just incredibly lucky. I think that, I hope I'm good at my job, but I also think I've had the right jobs come up when I've been ready to make a move. I think that's probably sums it up.
No, that's really interesting as well, because I guess kind of, too often at school we're kind of told to go for careers that kind of are potentially the most employable, where there's the most opportunities, but sometimes that doesn't substitute doing something that you really love and enjoy. I think you kind of have to balance those two, and don't do something that you don't like just to make loads of money. I don't think that's something anyone should really encourage.
No, absolutely. And I think that not everyone can do exactly what they want. We can't all be my 6-year-old said that they'd asked at school what everybody wanted to be, and half the class had said rock star. Well, they're not all going to be rock stars. So you can still aim for something with a realistic attitude, and if you really, really want it, then you can get as close to it as possible. I'm lucky enough to doing a job that I absolutely love.
If you could kind of, to sum this up, if you could give one major piece of advice to kind of young people who want to get, say, into either art conservation or conservation more generally, or the heritage sector, what would the advice, what advice would you give? What would be the kind of the one piece of advice that you'd give them?
I would say it's back to the getting yourself out there, learning what you can, volunteering. I know it's not all easy to volunteer. I had to have a billion other bar jobs and all the rest of it at the same time. You've got to be you've got to be prepared to put the graft in and earn the money where you can, but get as much experience as you possibly can, and be tenacious.
It's been lovely to talk to you, Rachel. So thank you for your time. And thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it.